Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the May 14th, 2024 council meeting. We have a quorum, so we will begin. And can we get a roll call?
Councilmember Mendoza.
Here.
Vice Mayor Meyer.
Here.
Councilmember Orlemans.
Here.
Councilmember Pearson.
Here.
And Mayor Bryant is absent.
And if you could all join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we're going to go right into public comments. The public comment period time for tonight's items will be 5 minutes each. We'll also set presentations and proclamations at 10 minutes, but we can extend the time if there is needed discussion. Amanda?
At this time, the public present in the chambers are permitted to address the council on items that are not on the agenda, items that are listed under presentations, informational reports, or on the consent calendar. Requests for future agenda items, new requests, comments for the meetings, detailed future agenda items, or business items should be made when that item is called. Please limit your remarks to 5 minutes. The microphone will be muted when the timer has expired. First speaker is Cynthiana.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I had to come directly from work, so excuse me if I'm a little frazzled. I'm here to ask you to please bring back general public comment on Zoom. People are returning to the office. Most are still driving from long distance commute at 7 p.m. because there are no local good paying jobs as promised for 20 plus years. Plus, majority of people do not trust that council members, especially 3 of them, you know who you are, one is not here. But hopefully he'll take the time to listen to this. You're not reading emails. That's the general feel. We know the same 3 don't want to hear from the residents, even though they claim otherwise, but the residents want to be heard. Secondly, my neighborhood, Los Ranchos, is being harassed by code enforcement about basketball hoops. My neighbors cannot be here for the reason I mentioned before, because they work late. Some of them watch the kids at home. Some took their kids to programs they are enrolled in. However, our District 2 council member was sent emails on this issue, even by a fellow lawyer, but she never bothered to extend the courtesy to respond. Our neighborhood was deprived of a park by previous councils. Our kids cannot access safely any basketball courts by themselves, so they can spend their energy playing with the neighborhood kids after finishing homework. It is sad to see how our neighborhood streets went from lively to quiet because of this. Please stop the harassment and let our kids play basketball in the street. Police performance. It went down considerably from when Mr. Hansen departed. I'm not surprised, since the incompetent chief of police was named by the incompetent city manager, who obviously wanted a puppet in that spot. I'm asking for Brentwood PD to do their job. Patrol and enforce Brentwood Municipal Code at our city parks. Never heard the council asking for this to stop, especially when we talk about Dolphin Park and Blue Goose. We know the mess that happens there every single weekend. Handle the homeless issue downtown. Homeless drink in public, have open container, harass customers, and who knows what else. And these are all subject to Brentwood Municipal Code that can be enforced. Please do not send me anything about Boise versus Martin. I had enough copy-paste of that novel over the years from PD, so just do your job. It is interesting how all major problems are present in District 2 and 4. Is police getting cozy with the 2 new incompetent council members and feel like they don't need to do their job? Another point, Vineyard and Marsh Creek Amphitheater. Very disappointing to see how we trust ChatGPT to design this for us. Is this even legal? And discard years of hard work from previous councils, planning, parks and recreation commissions, and residents. I found that very disrespectful. We went from classy to trashy very quick on that one. Like Brentwood residents do not deserve anything nice. Look at, for example, Wendy and Mountain Winery venues. They are privately owned, but it's a good example. Or even the design that we wasted $700,000 on. I'm not surprised since proposal came from a narcissist who is more concerned about her lip gloss instead of understanding how a pad-mounted transformer looks like, even when the staff clearly showed pictures during the presentation. She thinks pad-mounted transformers are cute. Nobody in their right mind thinks that. Stop the lies. You don't walk anywhere. You said it repeatedly, that you cannot. And by the way, all the transformers in your neighborhood are underground. It is Brentwood standard, because we're still better in Brentwood. Stop embarrassing yourself and the people who voted for you. Just do better, represent your district properly. Nobody cares about your lip gloss. Thank you.
Next speaker is Carolina.
New shoes, funny feet. So I wanted to thank Susanna Meyer for bringing a day of service to council 2 years ago. The first year was a little slow, but this year it was phenomenal. Over 700 people decided to give of themselves, their time, their resources to help other people in Brentwood better their lives, to help nonprofits who help people better their lives. And I think that is amazing. Great things happen to you psychologically, endorphins, when you help other people. It makes you feel so good because you've done something for someone else without the expectation of something in return. That's the best kind of giving there is. I look forward to what it's going to look like next year. It's going to be epic. If we had 700 people this year, I would hope that we could double that next year. So I would like to thank Vice Mayor Meyer, Amy Tilley, and Julie Deck from the planning team. I really do look forward to the program next year. I'll be better about reading my emails because I have to admit I've missed it this year because I didn't fill out the form right, but next year for sure I'll get it right. The other thing I wanted to talk about real quickly is there's been a lot of talk about DEI and not teaching DEI and not teaching critical thinking. And I have to tell you that I am a huge advocate of both because kids are smart. Kids are really smart, and we don't give them enough credit. They can hold two concepts in their heads at the same time, and they can definitely hold two concepts in their heart at the same time. When my kids were in elementary school, they came home one day and they're like, "Mom, we have something to tell you." And I said, "What?" "We have a friend and his parents came to pick them up at school today and they have two moms and they have two big dogs." And I said, "Okay, so tell me about the dogs, then tell me about the moms." And I got to meet the moms, and the moms were absolutely fantastic and they did so much for community. And the kids were fine. They understood that this family looks like that, our family looks like this. Other people's families, they have one mom, no dad, or one dad, no mom. Some live with an aunt, some live with a grandma. The point is that kids can understand this, grasp it, and it doesn't change their faith. They know to be kind because intrinsically they are kind. And the critical thinking comes in being able to hold both those concepts in their minds and in their hearts at the same time. So it's really important that we as a community encourage this in our kids so we don't have ugliness as the kids grow up, because the older they get, the meaner they get. The proclivity for just damage grows exponentially. So I encourage this in all aspects, and that includes the community celebrations at the schools and the community celebrations as from the city. Thank you.
Next speaker is Paul.
Good evening. I attended the April 30th fentanyl awareness event at Liberty's Performing Arts Center. There were presentations on a variety of topics, a moving testimonial, and comments from a panel of students regarding their firsthand experience of drug use, principally vaping in schools. All this was well-meaning and may help adults respond to drug emergencies, but these were all back-end patches. There was not a word about the cause of the problem, and that upwards of 300,000 Americans have been killed by fentanyl and opiate poisoning since the current administration came to power in Washington. I mentioned that we must understand that we are at war with the drug cartels and gangs who are backed by China. No amount of Narcan kits will fix this. And I also spoke to the DEA reps at their table display in the lobby. I asked them about their interdiction efforts at the border, especially now that San Diego is the crossing of choice. They said, we can't comment on that. So where does this leave us? As I told the assembly there, we need to vote for a better solution. The constant drumbeat of woke propaganda, which elevates race to a top-line social indoctrination tool, along with DEI, CRT, and the Marxist communist political movement from the far left. These programs are now falling out of favor because they foster social unrest, disorientation in youth, as we've seen, and work against the performance-based advancement across industries. California ranks last in public education performance. Even at our own district, at Liberty, 38% of 11th graders do not pass the standardized reading test, and 72% do not pass the math test. In the meeting I attended, an official commented that students coming into the school are not sufficiently educated for the grade level. BUSD teachers recently rallied for pay increases on top of the 9.75% they received last year, along with a 2.5% one-time bonus. Of course, high inflation and high cost economy given to us by the White House one could understand the want for more money. But what is being done in the classroom to increase student performance? That's the point of public education system and the demand from every parent. Also, on a national level, that affects us. The World Health Organization, which demonstrated its corruption by supporting China's complicity in the COVID pandemic, is on the cusp of being granted power to dictate pandemic response protocols to America. HHS, CDC, local health agencies, and the federal and state governments will all enforce these protocols. We must stand united and not again accept the lies and carnage that was and is caused by the international, national, and state COVID response. The new Title IX mandate is working its way into law. For any school that accepts federal funding, the White House wants to mandate that transgender people must be allowed to compete against the opposite sex. In this case, males compete against females. If anyone thinks this is fair, watch an episode of Team Ninja Warrior College Madness. Male and female athletes run the same course, but separately. The performance superiority of the males is immediately obvious. Direct competition should not be allowed in our schools. Yet transgenderism and the use of drugs and surgeries is endorsed by government policy. Young children are being groomed by adults to question their sex, and the state will punish medical practitioners for refusing to do surgeries or administer drugs like puberty blockers. A 2024 study out of Netherlands followed 2,700 people over 15 years and revealed that most kids grow out of their earlier gender confusion. These procedures are damaging and are non-reversible. They are being pushed by a growing industry that charges $120,000 to $140,000 per transition. Big money, big influence on policy. Thank you.
The next speaker is Danny.
Good evening, everyone. First, I want to thank Councilwoman Pearson. She'll be meeting with my son tomorrow, and hopefully we will have a homegrown international award-winning artist perform at Juneteenth. Fingers crossed. I once again request that you allow my neighbors to be heard during open comments via Zoom. Here's the thing. You are all comfortable speaking in public, whether it's your job, your history, whatever. This is not true for most. Coming in and being seen while advocating for or against a war, is not easy. Coming in and telling their horror and fear stemming from a house party shooting is not easy. You should not let the fear of a planned Zoom bombing attack stifle a person's right to be heard. Even though I believe we almost had another event recently from those haters, but we have a 7-second delay feature. Other things, this is money well spent. Now, I do not agree with the gentleman who spoke before me. However, I support his right to be wrong. This is the core tenet of our First Amendment. And quite frankly, we are stifling it. There are 3 offices up for grab this year. There are at least 2 incumbents running. Do you really want to have to answer the question of why are you denying my neighbor's right to be heard over the next 5 months? Particularly since the last no vote hinged on a person who's running to keep his role as mayor, a person who has often spouted platitudes regarding free speech only to continually deny it. Again, the planned Zoom bombing attack was months ago, and yes, it looks like we have come close. And although there hasn't been any real indication officially, yes, it exists. However, we do have Zoom. And we do have the right to be wrong and be heard. Thank you.
Next speaker is Jeremy.
Hopefully you can hear me okay. Good evening. Hope you're all well. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I'm here to talk about the splash feature at Dolphin Park, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself and some other neighbors who couldn't be here tonight. As some of you, probably a lot of you know, surrounding residents at Dolphin Park for years have expressed concern and provided numerous examples about the unintended consequences of the splash feature being installed in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Those issues are well documented with the city and the police department. With the splash feature recently opening back up, unfortunately, those concerns have amplified again. The most recent example was this past Saturday, people arriving as early as 6 a.m., trucks and vans dropping off tables, chairs, canopies, play structure equipment, and a bounce house, which later led to large numbers of people at the park all day and into the evening, which also led to congested streets, loud music playing with the bass rattling windows, smoking, alcohol consumption, litter left behind, and then of course the wind blowing it on front lawns. As always, we've sent pictures to the city documenting the occurrence. Unfortunately, to add fuel to the fire, we've also seen an increase in night activity as well, where people are coming to the park and are loitering on the playground by the splash feature and breaking into the restrooms. I believe sometimes they're not locking correctly at night, which could also be giving them access. So something for Parks and Rec to look into. We see them there typically smoking, drinking, doing graffiti, being pretty loud. And they do sometimes do the new version of Ding Dong Ditch, where they ring the doorbell and then kick your front door. We know these aren't residents in the neighborhood because they're arriving by cars. And most likely, we assume they're learning about the park because of the popularity of the splash feature. We do continue to report these issues to BPT as well. So we feel like we're doing our part and continue to try and work to be reasonable and balanced when it comes to the solutions to these issues. We enjoy seeing kids enjoying the splash feature as long as it's being used as it was intended to be used and people are cleaning up after themselves. Unfortunately, a lot don't. And yes, there has been progress made with the steps taken to date, which we are grateful for. But we have to say after this weekend and just years of dealing with this issue, it's getting tiring, and we're hoping additional proactive measures can be taken as we go into this season. Now, we get it. Nobody wants to be the party police. We don't want to be the party police. But the bottom line is that the infrastructure doesn't support these types of events, nor could it ever be supported because it's in the middle of a residential neighborhood. It also leads to unintended consequences like the activity we're now seeing at night. We didn't used to have that problem, now we do. It's not fair to residents, especially surrounding residents, as it impacts our quality of life, where the quality really should be at its highest, which is our homes. Now, when we moved here almost 8 years ago, our understanding was that we would be living across the street from a neighborhood park, not a regional park that attracts people from all over the county, which is what it ultimately is on the weekends when the splash feature is open. We think this can be solved. We know it can be solved. And the park can be a neighborhood park again on the weekends. We just need all of your continued leadership in working to resolve these issues. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
I have no additional speaker cards.
Amanda, I'd like to break in for a moment. I know that there are active conversations going on and that PD has some follow-up work here, but I wanted to ask if Bruce could please follow up with Jeremy or a representative of the neighborhood about the locking of the bathrooms at nighttime to make sure those are sufficiently locked.
Yes, we will follow up.
Thank you. Do we have any online comments?
We do not allow the online comments for open general public comment.
So we are going to close public comments and go into informational reports from council members, committees, liaisons, and staff. And this portion of the agenda is to provide an opportunity for council members to report on attendance at events, subcommittee meetings, and entities on which the council member has been appointed as a liaison, and for staff to provide brief updates and/or information to the city council. And we will start with Councilmember Orlemans.
Thank you. Thanks for being here tonight. It's been busy since April 23rd, which was our last actual council meeting. I'm going to take Councilmember Pearson's advice, and I'm going to skip, rather than running through just a list of items and events that I went to, I'm going to highlight a few that I would like to spend a minute talking about. I did attend the Tri-Delta Transit meeting, which I'm assigned here as a representative. I attended the PAL, Police Activities League Golf Tournament out in Discovery Bay. The 144 golfers and we haven't totaled out the amount of money raised for PAL yet from the event, but it was a tremendous event with a ton of support from the community. There were several council meetings in there in between, special council meetings, but what I wanted to spend the time on was the Unified Prom and the parade. Also an event put on by PAL, or hosted by PAL, for the life skills students. There was a little over 70 kids participated. 20 to 25 vehicles took them on a parade into Brentwood or into the community center. Parks and Rec did a phenomenal job of setting everything up, getting the street closures done, getting everything set up that we needed. Special recognition to Amanda Cheney and Stacy Dempsey, phenomenal job. They took charge of that whole setting up. There was supposed to be a car show before. The roads should have already been shut down. They weren't. These two young ladies jumped in and took over, along with the Brentwood Police Department, Officers Bollinger, Rucker, and Brulette, and it went off without a hitch. And watching the videos and the kids that were attending that event was worth all the effort put in to making this a great event for all the kids. And it included the 70 kids from Liberty, Heritage, and Freedom High Schools. So it brought kids in from all three high schools, which I thought was even better. Now, along with a ton of other things, that's it for this.
Councilmember Mendoza.
Since the last time we met, I judged a Lions Club high school speech contest. I attended the California League of Cities Latino Caucus membership meeting, attended the California League of Cities Latino Caucus board meeting, we attended a special meeting on transformers and had a closed session, and attended a Mount Diablo School District fundraiser.
Councilmember Pearson.
Since our last meeting, I did quite a bit. I attended the Community Day of Service, which was amazing, spectacular. I'm grateful that all of the council was there, as well as many of our community partners. And it just was a feel-good day. It wasn't just at the park. If you went anywhere else around the city, you saw people picking up trash, you saw people helping other people, you saw people checking storages and counting things. It was great. I've had since then, I think 3 Juneteenth meetings that were held here at City Hall. I've attended 2 Rotary Club meetings. I attended a special city closed session meeting. I think we've had 2. I also, after receiving more than, I think, like 25 emails and responding to them, I arranged for a meeting with the city manager, with Councilmember Orlemans, with the chief of police, and some of the officers from members of our police force to discuss ways in which we can better serve our residents and deal with the trash that's left behind by the unhoused population, as well as the current services that they're offering. I'm really happy with what our city is doing. Some other cities are not, they're just waiting for legislation to go by, but in the meantime, we need to figure out what we can all do to work together. And I feel like our officers have done that, cleaning up the area really swiftly. So it had come right after there was a meeting and everything was already done, but we're still working as a team. We're going to meet again to figure out how we can do something to bring back to city council. And I think we're smart in Brentwood to try to figure out things even while we're waiting for legislation to come down. I went to the farmers market twice. I attended the commission appreciation dinner, which was also awesome. But I had to leave a little bit early because I attended the League of California Cities East Bay Division meeting in Alameda. Attorney General Rob Bonta was there. He gave an update on retail theft law, the housing element updates. It felt good to have our update done. So that was great to be one of the cities. It's like, hey, we're done. And he talked about the legislation on the unhoused population that's currently before the courts. I could not attend, but I did want to announce that I gave over 100 tuxedos to the Unified Prom and 40 gowns to the students, and it warmed my heart when I saw the videos of them in the tuxedos and the gowns. I usually, as a former owner of a bridal shop, I used to donate to Brides Against Breast Cancer, so it warmed my heart to donate them to students who live here in Brentwood. It felt really good. And I moderated a panel to talk about encouraging there were about 16 youth in Contra Costa County specific. Many of them were Brentwood youth, on how to go into politics and how to do voter registration. And it was amazing. So that was everything that I did in the last few weeks. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I also attended the Commissioner Appreciation Dinner. And would like to again thank our Parks and Rec, Arts, Planning, and Youth Commissions for their hard work. And staff did a very good job at putting that event together and recognizing all of their efforts. Attended the Elected Women Luncheon for Contra Costa County. Of course, the inaugural Brentwood Community Day of Service, which has been spoken about a couple of times. And I want to reiterate thanks to Amy Tilley, Julie Deck, and the rest of the Volunteer Planning Committee. City staff did some really great work getting that organized. And we are going to be starting planning again, hopefully soon, so look for ways you can get involved. Attended the mayor's conference on behalf of the mayor who was unable to attend, watched the planning commission meeting, of course, and attended with the mayor the city's regular SAS 99 consideration of fraud audit meeting. It's a standard meeting, no worries there. And so with that, we will go into consent. I'm going to pull E6 for Public Works Week. Are any other items need to be pulled?
I'd like to pull E9.
Okay.
I'm not going to pull something. I would like to recuse myself on an item. It is item E12 because I live within 500 feet of this location. Although I do not think I will be biased at all. I know I wouldn't be biased. There is one element that I have to be safe, I like to err on the side of caution, and I'm going to recuse myself. So when we take the vote on consent, I will not be voting on item E12.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to invite Tony Pastor from Public Works to meet me at the podium, please.
Did you want to pass the ones that were on consent?
Do you want to pass the rest of them? We can do that, okay. Okay, do I have a motion to pass the remaining items on the consent
So
calendar?
I'll make a motion to accept every E1 through E5, E7, E8, E10, 11, E12, with the condition that a vote is not coming from Councilmember Pearson.
I'll second.
Okay, and do we have a, can I get a yes or?
All in favor.
I'm all in favor. Getting a little thrown off
Yes.
here, Tony. All in favor?
Yes.
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 Yes, abstaining
you.
from number E12.
Okay, thank you. I brought some, whoa, that's loud. That's a hot mic. I brought some papers with me, Tony, because you have such a great history with the city. I wanted to read a few things that you did. Thank you, Casey, for giving me some information to read. Tony has been with the city for 31 years and is the second longest tenured employee in the city. When he was hired, Brentwood had a population of less than 9,000. So I can imagine on all of your years, you've seen a lot of different things in the city. You've been in service in a lot of different positions, but landed most recently as a solid waste equipment operator and all that that entails. And again, I'm sure you've seen a lot. His work effort embodies the spirit of public works, and his dedication is a tribute to the many public works professionals throughout the nation and their contributions to protecting our national health, safety, and quality of life. I'd like to read a proclamation to you, and then maybe afterwards you'd like to say a few words? Okay. So the proclamation says, whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of Brentwood. And whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public work professionals who are engineers, managers, and employees responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our city's transportation, water supply, water treatment, solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential for our residents. And whereas it is in the best public interest for the residents, civic leaders, and children in Brentwood to gain knowledge of and to maintain a progressive interest in the public works needs and programs of their respective communities. And whereas the theme, Advancing Quality of Life for All, shines a spotlight on the way public works professionals advance our quality of life, whether as a first responder to a water main break, regular waste pickup, or a myriad of other ways they silently serve their communities. I think Tony is a prime example of that. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Brentwood does hereby recognize May 19th through 25th, 2024 as Public Works Week, and calls upon all Brentwood residents to join in showing our heartfelt appreciation and steadfast support for our military men and women. Dedicated this 14th of May, 2024. And would you like to say a few words before we take your photo? I'm wondering if that should have said maybe not military?
I'd just like to say I'm very honored to accept this on behalf of the entire Public Works Department. Although I get paid to do what I do, I feel very fortunate to be here working for the city of Brentwood. Not only do I live here, I grew up here, and I'm able to raise a family here, and I feel very blessed. So thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to request, I'm going to give this proclamation to him, but maybe we could fix the typo about the military on the bottom. It's not a prerequisite to be military if you're in public works, I'm guessing. Okay. And we'd like to hand that to you. And Darren's going to want to take your picture.
Right? Oh, there you are.
Thank
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service. And if you could walk that over to Amanda at the end to make sure we get that corrected. Well, or do you want to just get a replacement? Okay, we'll do a replacement then. Thank you. Just a quick announcement too. If anyone is interested in exploring public works, they're doing an open house for members of the community on May 23rd from 9 to 1 at the Maintenance Service Center on Elkins Way. And you can write to the city. Casey, I'm sure, would be happy to help with anyone who has any questions about that event. Thanks. Thank you. And we will move into, was it E9? Okay.
This is quick. I pulled it just because we get asked all the time what's going on with the Innovation Center, what's happening with PA1, same thing. And this is a big step. It's an easement for infrastructure. So I'm just excited about it. I hope our public is excited because this is a big step that staff has been working very, very hard on for a long time. So I was very happy to see this on the agenda. It's a big step and a lot of things to come. So that was it.
I actually had planned on polling it myself to ask if Darren could talk about it when we do our economic development presentation later, but if you had anything you wanted to add?
Absolutely. We will include this as part of the presentation that was requested by the City Council on Economic Development. Also, if Amanda would share my screen just to give an idea of the location of these this easement. There's actually 2 easements that are required. What's before you this evening is one, it's the green area. The property is owned by the Nunn family. The city is purchasing a permanent utility easement. Also, I did want to note that a portion of this permanent easement was donated by Mr. Nunn. So we're paying $200,000, but the value of his donation is around $70,000. He and his grandchildren, who we've worked closely with, have been great to work with, and we appreciate their willingness to work with us as infrastructure will be installed from the end of Empire, basically where that red line ends, and it will come across the property and terminate on the west side of Highway 4. Once we finalize an agreement with the Hauser family, who we've been working closely with and appreciate their willingness to work with us, we hope that'll be back soon. And then the project, our engineering department and Alan have been working on finalizing the specs. So the goal is hopefully to have this installed prior to the next ag season. So possibly the end of this year or the beginning of next year before they plant and begin their harvest.
I was just going to make an motion unless someone, so.
Just going to ask, so thank you.
So just a motion to adopt item E9.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Madam Vice Mayor,
Yes.
we usually just go ahead and adopt a motion for the proclamations as well. So if you want to do E6 as well, that would round them out.
Yes, I'll make a motion to adopt E6.
Second that motion.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Katie. Excuse me, asthma. Our next item is related to potential modifications to the regulations of outdoor dining and merchandise displays downtown. And Darren Gale, Assistant City Manager, will present.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and City Council. It's a pleasure to speak with you this evening. My presentation will be a little bit longer this time than the last item. Try and get. There we go. So the City Council authorized a future agenda item to discuss outdoor dining and merchandise display in downtown Brentwood due to issues created by outdoor dining spaces. Specifically, this included issues with outdoor dining where pedestrians on the sidewalk actually had to walk through a dining area where there was consumption of alcohol in those areas. That issue has been resolved, and many of the issues that initially participated, if I could say that word correctly. I won't even try again. I think everybody understood. Have been resolved, but there still do remain a few issues downtown. And we'll go through this, and then we'll go through some policy discussions. Businesses in downtown that have an outdoor dining area or are displaying merchandising, just to be clear, they are operating on the sidewalk and within the public right-of-way. So the city council went through a process and expanded the sidewalks to approximately 15 to 20 feet back in, I think, project kind of began in 2009. Improvements were accepted in 2013, and I don't know exactly when the sidewalks were completed, but during that time is when the sidewalks were expanded. The city's current regulations do not clearly set forth a common vision for the use of the public right-of-way for private purposes downtown. Through a detailed update to these regulations, the city can properly implement a vision and ensure the continued success of downtown businesses, and we have an amazing, thriving downtown. Although staff has had some conversations specifically with the executive director at the Downtown Brentwood Coalition regarding these issues, we have not met with any one specific business to talk with them, other than one of the businesses that had an issue, and they removed that when they moved, and then second, when they closed, the new operator removed the issue where people having to cross in between the area in which alcohol was being consumed. So once the City Council provides policy direction, staff will begin the process of working with the DBC and downtown businesses to draft modified regulations for City Council direction. So just to be clear, this is really a first step. This is an opportunity for the City Council to have a discussion, give some direction. Both residents, businesses, organizations that have an interest will have multiple opportunities to weigh in on this process. The next is, I mentioned the expanded sidewalks. The next is our current code. The current code is located both within the Downtown Brentwood specific plan, which talks about outdoor dining, and the Brentwood Municipal Code, Chapter 17.900. I mention this because what we're talking about is purely downtown. We're not talking about other locations throughout the city because to my knowledge, we don't have businesses that are operating within the public right-of-way. If they're operating outside, they are operating within a private property. And there was a process that the city has followed in the past and continues to follow today, which was a no-cost administrative design review process, which I'll refer to as an ADR throughout the rest of my presentation. But in addition to the ADR, during COVID-19, a pandemic, and under the city orders that was adopted by the City Council, the Director of Emergency Services included a general operation policy to comply with federal and state standards. Many of our businesses, I think as everyone knows, businesses were restricted from providing services indoors, and they were forced to do something to provide services to our residents and to stay alive, keep their businesses open. And during that time, through the emergency order, staff allowed for temporary use within the public right-of-way. At that time, though, when I say temporary, the idea was it was going to be maybe a few weeks, maybe a few months. And of course, as we know, it lasted multiple years. And so many of the businesses that were given a temporary approval, if you went and talked with them, they would say, hey, we went through a city approval process. We have approval. And we're doing everything that's been asked. But many of those improvements were temporary, and we'll talk a little bit more about that process. As the pandemic continued, the city did have a grant program which allowed for the installation of shade structures that we have downtown. Those shade structures were funded, most of them, not all of them, were funded through a partial grant through the city, and the business also funded a portion of those improvements. Each one of the shade structure was approved by the city and went through a building permit and was inspected by our city's building official, to my knowledge. Once again, as I stated, as part of this state of emergency, there were some temporary approvals. And I'd like to talk now a little bit kind of about the existing conditions. What type of outdoor dining and merchandising display is currently there as relates to our approval process. So it's really one of five. We have businesses that were approved, they have an ADR, and they're in compliance with that approval. The second would be they have an approved ADR and they're not in compliance. And what does that mean? By meaning not in compliance is that maybe they've expanded beyond what was approved at the time of their ADR, or they've installed additional fixtures and have not come and gotten a building permit as part of that. The third and fourth existing conditions are those that had the temporary COVID approval, and those that are in compliance with what was said was allowed, and maybe what they installed. And again, I just want to highlight that many of the reasons why we're in the position we are today is because who knew that COVID was going to last so long? And the city of Brentwood was very progressive in trying to help out their businesses downtown. And I think as a result, we have the success that we do downtown. I love every time I leave the office, whatever time it is. It could be early or it could be late. You know, downtown's busy and these outdoor dining areas are being used. And then the final one is a business with an outdoor merchandise display. And to my knowledge, all of the outdoor merchandise displays, none of the businesses currently have a administrative design review, an ADR, on file with the city that's been approved. So why proceed with an update? Let me talk a little bit more about the why. First, the city does have a code, and we do have rules. Those rules were written a while ago, and I think that they were written at a time that there was the assumption that there would be limited use downtown. And now, as Successful has become more and more successful, they're being used across many businesses. And there's no doubt in my mind, because in the economic development world, we're talking with a number of additional users, and there are many additional restaurants and eating establishments and food or drinking establishments that are very interested in coming downtown. So that's one reason why. Number two is there's no specific design criteria included. So at the end, I'm going to show a variety of pictures from downtown, and I've done my best, although you might recognize the business. I've done my best to take the pictures so it doesn't really show what the business is, but you probably will see it. And tonight, I don't want to talk about a specific business. We want to talk about standards that can be set up for people to follow. So again, our current code really lacks specifications. It lacks a true revocation process. And number six, we want to ensure that there's a quality look and feel today and in the future. We need to ensure there's continued public health and safety. And then item 7 that I don't have on here is currently we do not require any type of insurance for the businesses that are currently occupying the public space, and we need to ensure that that's included. So now I'm going to go through a variety of issues that were spelled out in the staff report. And once we're done with this, we can talk next steps and then open up public comment. And then I have a slide where we go through each one of these items where we're going to look for the city council to give direction so that staff can then take that and start working on a process if the council wants to move forward with an update to the zoning code related to outdoor dining and merchandise displaying. So first, currently there's, as I mentioned, there's a no-cost planning staff review for outdoor dining and merchandising. A certain physical building improvements required. A building code may necessitate building permits. So there are some improvements that a building permit was not approved or not applied for, and we want to make sure that everyone comes into compliance and ensure that a building permit was pulled and their project has been signed off on. Instead of the current ADR process that does not include the needed specific outdoor dining or merchandise display standards or requirement, staff recommends creating an official outdoor dining and merchandising display permit. This permit should be processed in conjunction with a nominal flat fee to businesses, which is currently not being charged, as there are costs associated with processing and enforcing such permits. Although the current ordinance does allow for a fee to process approvals, no fee is currently included in the city's cost allocation plan. Staff recommends that an updated ordinance includes more specific requirements, clearly defining the space in which a business can operate, and requiring a cleaning deposit, liability insurance, and annual inspections. Although many businesses will have concerns with the cost associated with these new requirements, this is part of the cost associated with operating within the public right-of-way. City staff is not proposing to charge or lease space for a fee to an operator, and the last thing we want is a business charging a fee to operate on the public right-of-way in front of their building. So the items here, processing fee, building permit, also an encroachment permit, which is through our engineering department, as improvements are made in the public right-of-way, as I went through the cleaning deposit, and then clearly approve the area to operate, and then permit revocation process. Next is access through a controlled permitted area. So this is what we talked about, where public pedestrian access through a controlled and permitted outdoor dining area. Premises really should not be permitted where alcohol is served. That's not currently stated in our code, and we would be looking for recommendations from the City Council tonight on that. C is accessibility for all. The minimum requirement for ADA is 4 feet. There was discussion in the past from the City Council of possibly increasing that to 5 feet. And so tonight we'll be looking for City Council direction on that. City staff does not like to include the tree guards as part of that 4 feet minimum spacing requirement. Although they might be able to be used for ADA requirements, they're not always maintained perfectly. I think if you've ever walked on a tree guard here or in other communities, they can sometimes wobble, or there's a trip hazard. And then additionally, if the City Council was to increase that space from 4 feet to 4 feet to 5 feet to allow the director's ability to decrease it down to 4 feet due to physical limitations. So if there's a tree in the way, some other type of physical improvements downtown. The next policy discussion, maintenance of the occupied area. The existing ordinance states that a property owner / business with an ADR is to maintain the sidewalk in front of the business, but this is really not well defined. This section of the code will need to be improved and expanded to ensure staff has a process to revoke a permit if a condition is not properly implemented. Staff recommends that the criteria for revocation of a permit be included in the new ordinance, as well as specific regulations related to maintenance responsibilities. E and F, in the next 2 slides, I'll have pictures to go over these. There was some discussion from the City Council related to bar seating facing the public right-of-way. So ABC alcohol beverage control requires some type of barrier if there's alcohol being served. That can, some cities that's landscape, that could be here locally it's a fence, but it could be a variety of things. And the question is, do you allow for seating on that fence or the barrier looking out towards the public right-of-way? And then finally, does the City Council want to create a vision of what you want these to look like? You know, dictate the height, what type of material, and the location of these fences and barriers. When the shade structures were installed downtown, there was an assumption that they would all be installed kind of similarly and underneath those shade structures. Some businesses have expanded beyond it, and where they've placed the fence has changed between many of the different businesses. So here, since I assume that we might refer back to these as there's discussion and policy, I've kind of given each one a letter. But this just gives you an idea of what I wanted to show here are the material. So, you know, the one on the left is all wood. B has, you know, wrought iron with a, you know, wood top bar or table seating. C has very decorative metal with, you know, a heavy duty table on top of it. And then the next one is another, D is another wood top. And then finally E, I think, is actually like a granite countertop on top of the fence of wrought iron. These pictures here, I've included to demonstrate where the fence is actually located. And if you're ever walking down the street, if you look down and there was a nice straight line, that would be very pleasing to the eye. This is not wrong, it's not right, but this is how it's currently installed. Sometimes it's on the outside of the column. Sometimes it's on the inside of the column. Sometimes it's 2 feet outside the column. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 feet outside the column of the shade structure. And what we'll be looking for this evening is the city council to provide us direction on how you would like to see the implementation of a new policy. And then implementation, which might be one of the most difficult discussions for the city council. And so we just want to give a couple of options here. Number one, city staff our recommendation is that we require all businesses to apply for a new outdoor dining and merchandising display permit. Specifically, because we want to ensure that there's conditions with that permit that requires the business to maintain the sidewalk, ensure that we have insurance or indemnification for them operating in the public right-of-way, includes a revocation process, annual inspections, and ensure that all proper building permits were pulled and signed off on since they are operating in the public right-of-way. As I mentioned before, there's a variety of different existing conditions in the public right-of-way with an approved ADR or operating with a temporary COVID approval. So this process could be, I try to simplify it into 2 for each one, but we could come into a variety of options here. But the idea would be if the council wants to move forward with the new code, if we had someone with an approved ADR and they're in compliance, how would we deal with that business? So number one would be in compliance, ensure compliance with existing code, and add the items up above in A. If they're not in compliance, would we allow them to come into compliance with the existing rules, or would we require them to meet the new code? Again, in both option 1 and 2 of item B, staff is recommending that we need to include conditions that, at a minimum, requires insurance and a process to revoke a permit if they don't follow the rules. And then finally, C, operating with a temporary COVID approval. As I've mentioned before, I think every single one of these businesses believe that they have approval from the city because so much time has passed and that they no longer see it as temporary. A couple options would be come into compliance with existing code or meet the new code requirements. And once again, include the items that I've mentioned in A above. So next steps. After council provides council direction this evening, staff would begin to draft amendments to the code and the specific plan because our assumption is there will be a need for changes both to the zoning code and to the specific plan. We would conduct outreach, and we'd love to have direction from staff related to how you want that outreach to be. Our idea is that we'd work with the Downtown Business Coalition, the Downtown Brentwood Coalition, and they've sent a letter asking for that. We would then draft concepts for the council review to make sure that we're going in the right direction. After that meeting, we would then need to go back to Planning Commission since this is Chapter 17, and Planning Commission would then make a recommendation to the City Council, and then we come to the City Council for final approval. And then finally, depending on how the City Council wants to implement this, we need to go back and review all existing outdoor dining and merchandise display to ensure all proper permits were approved and what status they're in. We would really be kind of getting the cart in front of the horse if we did that before this meeting. Once the council gives us some direction, then we'll be able to go back and determine, how we need to handle this. And then finally, I failed to put it here, the timeline for this. This timeline is we would want to come back to the City Council in about a year. This will take a process. There's other projects that the City Council has priorities. So once those projects are done, staff can then start working on it, and we'll begin the process of drafting some concepts and to bring it back to City Council. Of course, if there's time, before that, we'll always bring it back as soon as possible. But we appreciate City Council's listening to my presentation this evening. I'm open to any clarifying questions, and then can answer any questions that you might have after public comment.
Thank you, Darren. Any clarifying questions? I guess Councilmember Pearson.
I have quite a few. So I think a lot of the proposal, the devil's in the details, and I think it would be helpful to know some of these answers if for the business owners. and the residents. One is, what would be the amount of the nominal fee mentioned in Section A? Is there a proposed nominal amount? What would we consider to be nominal?
So we would go back to and identify and determine what the cost is of processing the permit. The city council can do this in two ways. You could ask us to do that and ask for full cost recovery, or the council could set a flat rate based upon, your discussion this evening. Carrie might be able to explain kind of the cost allocation plan and how that's put together. But in short, if you want full cost recovery, we would make that determination based upon community development, determining the time, average time that it takes to approve a project. Or like I said, the city council could adopt just a flat rate.
Okay. And then cleaning deposit, would that be the same type of process?
That's correct. So right now, the city spends approximately $11,000. Every time we clean the sidewalks, it's $11,000. And we've cleaned them once for the last 2 years. And I think in the upcoming budget, it's proposed to clean the sidewalks twice.
Is that just downtown, the 11,000?
That's just downtown.
Okay. And when you talk about the additional liability insurance, is that adding the city as an additionally insured to cover the sidewalk area? Or is that extending the insurance beyond the actual used, rented, or owned space?
That would be the space that they are occupying in the public right-of-way.
Okay.
So outside the fence area or outside the area that they're not using, that would not be part of that indemnification.
Can you, I didn't see this in the staff report, can you articulate more for us the intention behind not having the seats, why we would not want the seats to face the public way?
That was brought up by a council member, and there was twofold. One was that sometimes you will see a person that stands outside the fence, and they are consuming beverages, eating, drinking. It could be an alcohol beverage, could be a water, could be a soda. So that was one of the issues. The other issue that was described was interactions with a person who might be drinking and having an interaction with a person that's just walking down the street, and that they might feel intimidated as a result of those conversations. As I've done some research, most cities allow for it, some cities restrict it. And that's really up to the city council to make that determination and direction.
And when we talk about uniformity in the materials, which was, I think, item F,
Yes.
would this go back to LUD first, or what would the suggestion be? Because now we're talking about, I don't know, changes to the design elements, and it seems like that would be a LUD type thing to discuss first.
If the city council would like us to go back to LUD, we can. Our idea was that we just come back to city council with a variety of options. So if the city council tonight said, hey, we want to have some type of uniformity with, design, materials, we could bring back examples to the city council prior to going to planning commission. If we just went to LUD, we would go to LUD, and then we assume we'd need to come back to the entire city council before. So it just adds another step in the process.
And then my last question, I promise, everybody. If this is something that needs to happen around the entire city, why are we just talking about downtown right now?
Yeah, so great question. So during COVID, many businesses had to operate outside, and they operated out into not into a public sidewalk. They were operating in a private space, in a parking lot. Those businesses have now moved back into. So we do not see that this is an issue citywide. This is really an issue only downtown, where we have a very wide sidewalk that allows for the use of that public space for the businesses. And so we're not singling out. It's just the only place that it's actually occurring.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Mendoza.
I have a question. On the June 22nd, if in the future, if we reference a meeting, if we could put the what was discussed in that meeting, because I don't have a great memory. I can read it, but it's hard to go back. But so are you here because of January 22nd, or are you here from another meeting in direction? And what was I just don't remember the exact direction that we gave that brought us here today. Because I remember the business that we're talking about, but they're gone.
They are.
So,
I don't know word for word, but can I, if I may, or if, please don't hold me to every little thing I'm saying, but the direction of the city council was that there's issues related to outdoor dining, especially with alcohol consumption. that we've described with the one business that's no longer in operation. The second one, there was a discussion related to parklets, which we don't have any businesses that are currently asking for any type of parklets and don't see the need. The third one, there was discussion related to bar top looking out. So those were kind of what initiated it. On top of it, as staff's reviewing it, we don't have a good process, and we currently have businesses that are in the public right-of-way. And so we thought this would be a great time to explain some of those issues. And at a minimum, we need to ensure that everyone has insurance, that they are properly cleaning, that we can revoke their permit if they're not following it. And all these other items are items that we're looking for council direction. And if council says make no changes, we'll make no changes. However, staff is strongly recommending the need for an update to the code as it relates to indemnification, a process that we go for approval. Let me go to this next one. This is the policy question, so I can just see it. So a building permit, encroachment permit, liability insurance, you're okay, I can just walk through it. And those are the three main ones. Oh, and the area in which a business is operating.
Okay. The reason I ask is because there's a local blogger who continually changes the narrative on what really happened. And by you doing this, they said, I brought this item forward. I didn't bring this item forward. I was talking about that one business that is no longer. So I think when we bring things, if it's staff bringing it forward, that's fine. Just say it's staff. But I think there was a lot of misunderstanding. So there was a lot of hate speech towards me, which could have been averted had we been clearer in the agenda packet. So again, let's be careful because we know there's a blogger who changes the narrative on everything. So we have to be very clear on what we put in the agenda packet. And yeah, I am the one who brought up the item of that, people having to walk through because that is against ABC code. And that's why that was brought through. So, okay, that was my only question.
Any questions?
Yes. Just so we're clear, all the businesses downtown are meeting state standards. They're ADA compliant with the way the outdoor dining is set up.
So I can't speak for ABC and what requirements they have. That's not the purview. My assumption is yes for that. But as it relates to city requirements, are you asking?
ADA access.
So ADA, there are a couple pinch points where it's not for a total of 4 feet. So there are two spots there are some issues so let me step back. We need to go, if the city council wants us to make some changes, we will go out and review every single one to make a determination. But Councilmember Orlemans, there is at least one spot that I know of, I think maybe two, where it's not a full 4 feet.
Okay, and then but they are compliant with our building codes. So there was inspections done on the overhangs.
So there was inspections on the overhangs. However, there are some the fences have not received any type of permit. They might not need a permit from a building code perspective, but they should go through an encroachment permit process. Additionally, there are some that have included electrical attached to their fences. That would require a building license, and they have not gotten a building license. So I said building license, a building inspection. They have not come and pulled a permit. And Alexis, I think, could add to it.
Yeah, I just wanted to elaborate on the ADA issues. So there's more to the ADA access than just the width of the sidewalk and those requirements. And we have the chief building official here who can speak to the ADA conditions downtown. So no, not all of the outdoor dining areas are ADA compliant. And it's not just because of the width of the pedestrian walkway. So Ken, would you mind coming to the podium and just so we're clear on what the ADA issues are?
Good evening. So one of the problems with the outdoor dining right now is that the bar tops create a dining and drinking surface that's elevated above 34 inches. And when you do that, you have to provide access for people with disabilities as well. So the current ones that are installed don't comply with that. There are no allowances for people who have disabilities to sit at one of those or pull up to one of those and have the same experience as someone who can stand there. So that's one problem that exists with them. As Darren mentioned, there's also people who have installed heaters, since I'm here, heaters, electrical lights, televisions, things like that, or monitors and screens. And none of these things have been permitted at the moment.
Thank you.
I have one last question. Why is that? Because I feel like we're putting the cart before the horse here. Why is it that staff didn't meet with, it says you've had meetings with Downtown Brentwood Coalition, but why not meet with the businesses first before coming to us? I mean, you probably could have used the direction from January 22nd and finagled that one into the opportunity to spend staff time and money. Why wouldn't it have been more positive to do that first?
The process that we followed, so first of all, this was a future agenda item request from a long time ago, and it's been on the future agenda item list for over 2 years. It's been a long time coming, but there's been other priority projects of the city council, and so we've been working on those projects. We could have gone out and met with the businesses, and I think that you would have been getting phone calls from businesses and you would ask, why have you not come to the city council to talk about this without a further direction? And I'm not saying that that would be bad. This is the process in which we determined that we thought would be best, is to come before the city council. And as much as we've received some emails, this is an opportunity to talk with nothing that's been done. As you said, a TV station had a brief article about this today. There was another person who talked about cracking down. That's not what the staff report said. It clearly said it's looking for direction from the city council on how you would like to move forward. And this is just an opportunity to present those items based upon that future agenda item. And we could always go a different process. And this is the process we've chosen, and I stand behind it, council member. And I knew it wouldn't be easy or fun giving the presentation. As I talked with Amy Tilley, she appreciated the openness. And this is why I've also mentioned that this will be a long process. It's not like something to be overnight. And we can always come back if you want more information before you give us direction. But I don't think the council had a full understanding of the current situation. And that's, we really do need to update our code to ensure that the city is protecting itself and that we're have good rules for allowing a business to operate within the public right-of-way. Thank you.
And I have a few questions myself, but more comments that are going to come later. First of all, thank you for that extra information about the ADA compliance. I had absolutely no connection there thinking about the level of the bar tops. But that does lead to the question, perhaps if some of the restaurants that are currently offering that to their customers could additionally potentially have a lower bar top or reduce the height of one, would that then be okay? I mean, what do you need a percentage of availability or accessibility?
Well, you need a certain length of countertop that's lowered to a certain level. It also requires knee and toe clearance and things like that. So there's a lot of specifications around it. So it doesn't look exactly like the ones that are there, but you can do it. It is possible. So, I mean, just like in any other bar or restaurant where they have a bar, if you look at those, a lot of times in the old days, it was the place where the part that folded up. Well, rules have been passed, you can't do that anymore. So you do need a section that's lowered to a certain height that provides knee and toe clearance, but there's just two different levels of bar. So if you go into a bar or restaurant now and it's compliant, you'll see two different levels of bar. And that is possible, yes.
Yeah, yes.
Do they have to be able to make so much of a wheel revolution, like in the bathrooms when we do ADA compliance in that section?
No, but you need a certain path width. You also need a certain amount of maneuvering clearance at that space. So once again, these are just technical requirements, but so you can't have things that block that path to the space. You can't have things that prevent someone who's in that space from backing up, turning around, going to the restroom, things like that.
Right, thank you.
Thank you for that. I think there's a much larger discussion here than I felt like I was going to hear from what was in the staff report. So your extra information is very helpful, and I'm sure we'll have some discussion around that later. Thank you. I also wanted to check maybe with Carrie in follow-up to Councilmember Pearson's question about cost recovery. Do we have any kind of an estimate about what cost recovery would look like? Putting you on the spot.
Good evening. So the costs themselves would be determined by the amount of time that staff would spend on compliance. So I don't have an estimate for you tonight. That would take a little bit of looking in to see how long these things take. The city council, though, does have the ability to set fees that are not full cost recovery if they wish. So you do have the ability. We can never go more than that, but we can go lower than that if you wish. But I don't know how much that would be without speaking to other staff involved in this.
So to be clear then, pretty much we would not be able to clarify what that amount would look like tonight. Okay, thank you. And I think one of the questions I had in reading the staff report was, what problem were you trying to fix? And I feel a little unclear about that. I mean, I know this was a different council member, a different item from what Councilmember Mendoza brought forward. And there's a lot to talk about here. And so it's kind of a confusing discussion. I know you said it was going to be over a year, but I just feel like there are still some things like the ADA information that will drive a conversation that we don't necessarily have all of the facts for. So I guess what my question for this would be is, if we move this forward and set some standards tonight, then where do we go from here? How does this one-year-long process, go forward?
Yeah, so I'll let Alexis kind of talk about the process. Alexis, did you want to? Or I can't. Okay, perfect. I thought I saw you picking up your mic, so sorry about that, Alexis. I got it.
I had a follow-up on the staff cost, not the process.
Okay. Would you like the staff cost question?
Sure.
First.
I just barely touched it. I'm very sorry. So for an ADR process, we don't charge currently. That's a complimentary for anyone who goes through the ADR. So we don't have existing cost estimates. But what we were estimating for an ADR for outdoor dining would probably be about an hour of staff time would be fair. There are going to be some that may take a lot more than that, and there'll be some that take less. But the 1 hour of staff time would be sort of a ballpark. So that would be under $200, for example, if we just did. So that wouldn't necessarily be full cost recovery, but that may be a fair estimate of what the average ADR could take for merchandise or outdoor dining.
Thank you, Alexis. Darren, was there more?
So then you asked about process. So as the council has had future agenda items, you always ask us to bring back the item and any other thing that we might think of. And as we were reviewing this, there's some deficiencies within the code. And we didn't provide everything, as you stated. This was really just kind of a workshop to get feedback. So I don't have an exact timeline of when staff would begin working on this. But we've been working on the staff report for a significant amount of time, getting information and then working on another project, come back, and it was like, okay, here's the time. And also as the city manager tries to determine, there's, some meetings are very long, some meetings are short. This one's a little bit shorter. And so we brought this forward to this evening. We could come back. I don't believe that we would really come back in the next 6 months. So if you wanted additional information, we could do that before we began a process of sitting down with the DBC and sitting down with businesses. If you would like more information before you give us some direction, or if the direction is to go meet with the DBC, we would schedule that time out and come up with the time frame. We've got to sit down and look at projects that are coming in the door in community development and make that determination. But like I said, that's why we really saw this, still coming, after the first of the year, coming back to the city council.
And I think, to be clear, Darren, I didn't necessarily want to know what the timeline was, more like the process. For example, where could we conceivably bring in stakeholders so that the discussions moving forward are very productive
Yeah.
and have everyone's opinions and everyone's got all the information they need?
I thank for the clarification, Vice Mayor. We would see that being the first step. As you provide direction, then we would sit down and then we'd bring options, because there might be some things that the city council gives some recommendations to tonight, and the DBC and the businesses downtown are going to say, hey, that doesn't really work for us, right? As we talk through this, and then we would come back and say, okay, here was what you recommended, but here was some other issues that have come to light as a result of the discussions with the businesses.
Thank you. Going back to the bar tops, because it's one of the items that we got into a little bit more depth with. Outside of any ADA concerns, have we ever had complaints from residents about some of the issues discussed around conversations on both sides or the alcohol consumption piece?
I'll look across the table. I don't see. The only one I've heard personally is people consuming alcoholic beverages on both sides of the fence as a result of the bar being there. That's the only thing I've heard personally.
Thank you. And I think we've talked a bit, well, this is more for conversation, so we'll get into that more. Any other clarifying questions before we open public comment?
I do have a
Okay.
question. So this one is for our city attorney. It was already brought up, so I'm not telling people how to sue us, but what are our liabilities if it is a public space? We're talking about the lack of ADA compliance, and we're talking about unpermitted things, people sitting on public space. Is there any liabilities we need to be concerned about?
So thank you for your thoughtfulness and how you frame that. I think what you've heard tonight is that staff strongly recommends that the council give direction to consider having these businesses indemnify the city and take some steps that would offer some protection to the city, because they are currently operating in a space that is public right-of-way. And so if there was an incident there, we would want to have coverage by the business operators. So those types of measures would allow the businesses to continue operating, but also provide that measure of protection for the city that you're alluding to.
Thank you, and bless you to the sneezer.
Thank you. And there is, I believe, no more conversation or question, I should say. We can start the public comments.
At this time, the public present in the chambers and on Zoom are permitted to address the city council on items on this agenda item. If you're participating via Zoom, please raise your hand to speak under this item. If you're in person, please file a speaker card with the city clerk. We will take public comment from those participating in the council chambers first, and then those participating via Zoom. Remarks will be limited to 5 minutes. Your microphone will be muted if you speak on items that do not pertain to this agenda item or after the timer has expired. We did receive 2 written public comments for this item, and they have been posted on the city's website. Our first comment is Peter.
Well, thank you, Vice Mayor, council members, and staff. Gil, thank you, or Darren, thank you very much for the presentation. That was very thorough. Just want to let you know, I was the lead on this project several years ago as president in my first term. So if there's any questions that I could answer on the side, I'm more than happy to do it. I spent a lot of time on that. I know you did receive a letter from our executive director, Amy Tilley, today. So I again ask if we can to possibly work collaboratively with you guys, the stakeholders, the business owners, to come up with a lot of these resolutions going forward. I do believe in a lot of the stuff that you said of regulations and the ADA compliance. So we're here to help. This is our downtown that we work very hard every day. So thanks a lot.
Next speaker is Cinziana.
Good evening again. I don't have anything prepared. I just want to thank you for bringing this to the floor, because it's something that's been not necessarily bothering me, but it's long due for our city. We're growing, we're developing, we have great force behind the Downtown Business Coalition, and we can do better. And from that perspective, all I want to say, when it comes to design, I heard something about to keep it uniform, have the very same materials involved. In my opinion, that will take away from the specific of each place. So for instance, if you have a steakhouse, you can have the very same design as of a pizza parlor, for instance. So I would like to see a little bit of not necessarily flexibility, but creativity and liberty of design as far as expressing the specific of the place, because having something more diverse, it gives, the flair of the downtown. For example, if we look at downtown Pleasanton, they have that type of, it's a unified look, but each place has its own look, if that makes sense in any way. So I understand the criteria, but as far as giving the flexibility to each business to express their own specific, I think that'd be great. The cleanliness, I'm not really sure if we can impose anything within the space of occupied by their patios, let's say. But some places, your shoes are sticking to the floor, if that makes sense. Also, possibly is not in scope for this project, but when it comes to imposing some criteria and requirements for private properties, such as shopping centers, if we go to the 2nd Street Safeway Shopping Center, the sidewalks are terrible. And it just looks like a war zone. That, food spilled, and it is just really, really dirty. So just something to keep in mind. Like I said, I don't think possibly it's in scope for this project, but if we can do something about that, just to improve the overall look for our city, that'd be great. So thank you.
Next speaker is Carolina.
I actually remember the meeting that this came from 2 years ago. And this was, nothing of this was what was asked for. It was like Councilmember Mendoza said, it was a very specific business where there were things going on that were in violation of a whole lot of rules. So what we have now is a request for design, zoning, compliance, ADA, lower the bars, and all this was done during COVID when the city was in a rush to make sure that people could stay open. But the city gave no direction on ADA compliant outdoor seating and bars and clearance and spinning of the wheelchair to make sure that people could get to the bar. So all the businesses went, you know what, I need to keep my doors open, and I'm just gonna build outdoor seating, and I'm gonna put shade over it. So some establishments went above and beyond, and they put fans and they put lights and they underlit their bars, which is really great from a walking by it standpoint. But they were never told about ADA compliance and the width from the sidewalk. Some establishments have a tree planted there. So if you're in a wheelchair, you actually have to go around the tree, try not to hit the bar, and go around. I see people on a regular basis, they're talking to their friends. The way the bar goes, if this is the bar, their friend is sitting here, and they're standing right there, right, with the drink that they bought from inside the establishment. They're having a conversation, then the person goes back in to drop off their glass. So I'm that to me is not a big deal because they are right there. The issue that I have is the amount of decision-making that is being asked from City Council tonight based on no information. The city has not taken gone downtown, measured, taken a look at all the businesses that built outdoor seating during COVID that this affects. I haven't heard a single conversation about who's going to pay for lowering of these bars. Some of these were beautiful. God, give Cocoa Wine Bar props for theirs. They actually had their logo made wrought iron. That's on their bar. And so now, if you're asking them to drop it to be ADA compliant, who's going to pay for that? They paid for that design, they paid for the materials, they did the install, they got funding from you, but now how do we fix this? So I think you need to start from a place of information. How many places are actually out of compliance? And what is it gonna take to put them in compliance just with ADA, right? Just with ADA. And now there's other things, other expenses that you want the businesses to incur. So I think the second thing is once you realize how many businesses are not in compliance with a whole lot of things, not just the bar, the ADA, but also insurance and permits, then you can sit down and take a look at how much is this going to cost, how many staff hours is this going to take, and what is this going to look like. I personally think this should be tabled. You need a whole lot more information before any decisions can be made. I have a minute 28. Okay. West Virginia is last in education, not California. We are 37th overall, 20th in community colleges, 14th in completed bachelor degrees and master's degree.
Carolina,
Yes?
can you please keep it to the agenda item?
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
Well, then I'll leave it at that. But I want to stress the fact that businesses spent a lot of money to keep their establishments open during COVID so downtown wouldn't absolutely die. So this has to be thoughtfully done, carefully done, and with lots and lots of information. So I recommend tabling this. Thank you. I just had to say that because, you know.
Next speaker, Danny.
This is going to be interesting and somewhat contradictory because one of the codes being discussed, I know all too well. And even though I know that all too well, and I am willing to bet that the 4 or 5 businesses that were created during 2022 in this conversation weren't told that this was going to be temporary. It's a real safe bet. I know it was discussed, and I feel sorry for them. But as somebody once told me, they should have checked with the city. And with respect to sidewalk cleaning, which is new to me, I thought that was always the resident, the establishment, because if the city is supposed to clean the sidewalks, oh man, I'll give you my address. That sidewalk is filthy. And I'm being serious. This is not me being snarky. I always thought, you know, whatever or whoever was there, it was their responsibility to clean. Now, the diagram I'm looking at, or the PowerPoint I'm looking at from page 236 looks different than what Darren put up there. But with that in mind, I propose option B, which is basically just requiring the establishments to go through the process again. Now, I know that won't be popular for incumbents or anyone running for 2024, but it's a simple calculus. During COVID, we had to think outside of the box for restaurants to survive. Outdoor dining was the best of a series of bad options. The reason outdoor dining worked during this time was because simply there wasn't a great deal of foot traffic. In reading the statutes, there doesn't seem to have a need for clarity. As option B outlines, if you want to maintain your current setup, you can't use COVID-based administrative design review standards. Basically, if you have to change the design, it has to be reviewed. So I don't know if that means, as others were saying, you have to tear stuff down, but we have guidelines. They were established back in 2005. They've only been amended twice, the last one being 2015, before COVID. And even those modifications were minor. So in essence, I think what we have has worked. And again, I feel sorry for those people who weren't told about ADA compliance, which is unusual because I thought that was a given for any business. And I do feel sorry for them, but we can't use standards that were in case of emergency break glass as a rationale to change everything, because this has been established now for 20 years. And honestly, if it ain't broke, we shouldn't fix it. We should go with option B, which is basically everyone return, go through the process, and let the chips fall where they may. Thank you.
I have no further speaker cards from the chamber. I do have one hand raised on Zoom. Amy Tilley. Go ahead.
Hello. Sorry I'm zooming in tonight. We had a family emergency. Otherwise, I would definitely be there tonight. This is an important topic, and as you guys have all, everyone has said, it's a huge topic. There's a ton to cover, and that's why even my letter, on behalf of the organization was so short, because there's just, it could have been a book, right? I could have written a book about all of this. So, the outdoor dining that we have really was a lifesaver, but then it was like this silver lining of COVID that it really did something really interesting in downtown. And I know that no one in there argues that when you look down the street and see everyone out there enjoying themselves, that's something special that came out of something very bad. And our kind of position, as Peter mentioned, is we want to be able to use some common sense here and just some consideration for the businesses. As was mentioned, they didn't just do the bare minimum. I think we need to look at the additional investments that they made, in terms of, I don't look at the fact that some of these guys put in some TVs or some ornamental, spent thousands of extra dollars making it look nice. Like, that's something that they went ahead and did above and beyond. These businesses created downtown. They created what's down there and the excitement. Not me, not the city. No one else did it. The small businesses did it, and they did it by putting their own blood and sweat and money into these spaces. And I think that probably the like Danny said, the emergency break glass, that type of thing kind of happened, right? Where they put together outdoor spaces with very limited direction, and just kind of needed to really make the best choices. And obviously what they did work, right? They're professionals in hospitality, and they understand how to make a space welcoming and inviting. I think there's a few minor tweaks. Those are things, we should look at kind of on a case-by-case basis. And I'm sorry, I won't talk too much longer, just that we welcome the opportunity to work with staff to go through this. As Darren stated, there's, pulling up what I think is going to take time is pulling up, everybody's, what they did, and then kind of what they have, and then looking at that and individually, and then using just some common sense, in consideration for them, and that they've already obviously spent a lot of substantial investment in their furniture and hiring additional staff, and it changed the shape of the way they do business. And they are able to make additional revenue that way, and obviously that revenue translates into job creation and future investment So, what we see down there, what they've done, it's obviously should not be like a punishable offense, right? They've done something remarkable. And I think there's support across the board here. I think from residents, the city, the council. I don't, this isn't like a panic situation, just that, we want to be involved in that conversation in order to protect, the businesses from anything that it could kind of go sideways for them. Again, the nominal fee for the cost recovery, this is something where I think maybe, can we look at some type of like waiver grant process? Like, can we write a grant for something? Can we do something like that? I feel like it's pretty rough to ask them to pay $1 even to go back for something that was 3 years ago, where they've spent thousands of extra dollars to make it like a really nice space. Again, the ADA, insurance, cleaning, those are all like boxes to check that, yes, we need to look at those things and we need to address those and make sure those, right, safety, ADA, insurance, like those are no brainers. But some of this other stuff, I hope we can just work together on. I'm sure we can, we all work really well together. So that's kind of all I had to say. Just wanted to apologize. I'm not there in person, and thank the businesses for, everything they've done for the residents and the community. And, we're behind them. So thank you.
I have no further hands raised in Zoom.
Thank you. Since there are no more public comments, we will close that for now and move into council discussion. Who'd like to start?
I'll go ahead and start. I want to say, number one, first of all, I think everyone knows I support our downtown businesses. I think they're fantastic. I feel very blessed to have made some great relationships with all business owners, and they have been so welcoming. And one thing I thank them for, not only as a council person, but as a resident, is that during COVID, we fared pretty well financially as a city. And we fared well financially as a city because the city and the businesses worked together to be sure that we kept on trucking and making sure that we had the sales tax revenue we needed as a city, that they had sales they needed to take care of their family. So we've always worked together with our businesses, and I don't think this should be an exception. I do think there's a lot of things that have to be covered. The ADA, I think that's a no-brainer. I don't think anyone wants to be discriminatory against anyone with a disability, so I think we got to take care of that. I do think we got to figure out the maintenance, the legal responsibilities. I think the design, I do think we need some kind of standards around the design. I think that people having their own individual characteristic is important, but maybe, we see developments come up with like 3 floor plans or 3 facades. Like, is it a choice of facades? But I think that the first thing I would like to see is, because we know these things got to get done. There's no question about it. But I would like to see staff come at it from a city perspective, like what do we need? What are our must-haves from a city to make sure we're all good to go? And then how do we fit in all of the needs of the businesses and get those two parties together and then come up with a plan? Because I don't have a business downtown. I don't run a business, and I don't pretend to know what that's like. And I know they invest a lot of money, and I don't want that investment to be for naught. So I think that going back and looking at those things, like I said, like the design, is it the original? Is it something new? What's going on? The ADA, the legal responsibility, the maintenance. I think those are all important, but I'd like to see kind of a staff report of us coming together like we did during COVID, and what does that look like today? I don't think I have enough information today to do all of that.
Thank you. Councilmember Pearson.
I want to thank everyone for public comment. I thought it was really great, and it provided a lot of feedback. I also want to thank staff who were present to be able to answer questions as we rapid fire through them at you. Thank you for that. I think I felt some kind of way, and then we heard all the comments from staff and the public. And one of my big concerns is there is urgency to certain degrees when we talk about liability. So to Councilmember Mendoza's point, I think the ADA only makes the businesses and Brentwood safe. I think the cleaning and insurance, as Amy Tilley said, is a given, like we would want to. My concern is we have clear clear standards in 17.900.005, right? They're very clear and distinct. And I don't think we need to change or add to it. I don't really want to get in the weeds too much about, without it says here, like, to have a barrier. And I don't want to go too far into like, okay, it should be this design or that design. But one of the main concerns is having the ability to revoke. We may have another business that comes, and I think that we should give the city the opportunity to be able to revoke or to be able to say this doesn't meet our qualifications. And I think, again, as was stated several times, we do need more time to have a further discussion with more information. I do feel like I'd like to hear more about the ADA, because I'm like, all the stuff you brought up was phenomenal. Thank you. I think I don't want the businesses to take a big hit pocket-wise, but I also think when you have a business, when you have a restaurant or you have an establishment or whatever, ADA is always a concern on the inside that should have extended on the outside. And so when we talk about that, especially with our new committee that we're on, that's a consideration that becomes a really big deal to me. I also said when I talked earlier about like, we're talking about cost allocation, I have to agree with Amy Tilley. I think those are things that should be in the staff report. We should actually come back with actual costs, because what may seem like a nominal amount to one person, to a business owner, it could make or break whether or not they stay open. Because one of the questions that I have is, well, we're talking about a cleaning fee. Is this a one-time cleaning fee, a nominal amount, or is this one that we're going to take over 12 months? Or what if the incident occurs? So those are questions that I think we need to be able to answer, that I think we should be working with the Downtown Brentwood Coalition. They did help us bring the downtown up, and I think we should actually have the seat at the table, allow them to have a seat at the table to tell us what works and what doesn't work. But also, I do agree that we should also consider and talk about, is there the opportunity or the option to provide some type of remedy, or not a remedy, let me strike that, not remedy, but some type of grant process for businesses who want to be compliant, but they just don't have the means to. So I would like to find out if we have resources. If so, where would those resources come from? And what would that grant application look like for businesses who want to be able to, for example, lower the height of a table when it comes to compliance? We're not just talking about a city compliance, we're talking about state and federal regulations that we need to be very careful about. And then also, I'd like to find out how often we do safety inspections on items. In my area, there has been in other cities where our office has sued for what some business did that affected not only the city, but the business for a substantial amount, and nobody looked into the regulations of something. So what may look aesthetically pretty can cause, in one of my cases, someone's ability not to walk anymore. So I want to be very careful and cautious and make sure we have all the opportunity to have a further, more fruitful conversation when we come back, versus what we have before us is a good start. I also just want to say, is it possible we can get this back in this year instead of like next year?
If you're asking, we would need to go back, and it might push back other projects that you have. You have other priority projects that we're working on. And so staff's ask is that, and I think based upon the other projects are going, is that this would come back after the first of the year. If the council directs that it needs to come back quicker, there's possibility of hiring outside consultants. There's a variety of things, but at least with what we currently have on the plate, our recommendation is to come back early next year. At the earliest, 12 months as we put this together. And Councilmember Mendoza, if you want to speak, and then I can follow up.
Yeah, my question about I know we have the list online with the projects, but and I've asked for this before, it'd be great to know how you're prioritizing the projects is important, not due dates, but what are you working on? And that way we could have sat here and gone, you know what? Yeah, we know we told you this one, but can you move this one ahead? This is more important. So I understand what you're saying, but I don't know, like in your department that would manage this, what's more important right now? And then we can say, oh no, you know what? You're good to go. Like those are more important. Or then we could be like, no, can you move this one up? Like we don't know what else. We always hear we're working on stuff, but I really don't know what the priorities are. That's the only thing.
And before you follow with that one, I appreciate you being honest and open about we need more time and we're asking for the beginning of the year. I actually, after hearing, I think we don't have I'm concerned about us waiting to the beginning of the year when we talk about people have not provided us with insurance and indemnified us. I'm more concerned about that. And so I would ask that this would come back not within the next 60 days or 90 days, but it's been 2 years. I would ask that this comes back before the end of the year.
Can I break in and ask that maybe when someone makes the motion, we break it down into chunks and we say that the item on liability, for example, would come back within 6 months. The item on compliance with ADA would come back within this much. I mean, I think maybe if we can break it down into more workable chunks. I mean, I'll have you speak as well, but just wanted to suggest that.
That's not a bad suggestion, but can we break this up into chunks? Like, can we say, oh, we're gonna pass this regulation on, or would you all, I think I would defer to staff, would you all recommend that we do this in one big chunk of something to complete it? Or do we have the ability to say, we're gonna listen to the staff report on just liability, and then we're gonna make a decision just on liability?
I think you've articulated well, the primary issue is protecting the city's interest in any liability claims. That is a process that we could expedite quickly. Okay. We have a current process for an encroachment permit. We could just go request encroachment permits from everybody and require insurance with that, and that could be done pretty quickly. So you can get that motion probably tonight. Some of the other factors when you're revising the code, and it's Title 17, that has to go to the Planning Commission before it can come back to City Council. That's those things that take longer. With all the other projects community development has and land use projects, and the Planning Commission's busy for the next 6 months as well, in addition to all the committees you've created and all those businesses coming back to City Council. So there's just a lot coming, and maybe we need to share that more. I think we've tried to. You have a full plate through the rest of the year. But the priority projects are reduce the city's liability, and we can certainly expedite that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Vice Mayor.
Councilmember?
First of all, 100% agree with the downtown. I love being in the downtown. I love the feel of how the welcoming opening that the sidewalk restaurants have. I spent a lot of time in Europe when I was in the military, very similar to over there, and I really enjoy the way our downtown is set up. And until I saw this agenda item, I never noticed how different all of those areas are. My wife and I've walked it twice since this agenda came out. Last night was my wife and I walking through downtown, and there wasn't another single person on the sidewalk. We could walk arm in arm and have no choke points, no congestion. But when I'm down there at Farmers Market, I can't get past certain areas. Now, I understand what we're saying of breaking it up into pieces, but if we do that and we say, okay, let's make all the businesses ADA compliant, make them do what they're required to do to get that, and then we come back and say, yeah, but I don't like the fences being this way. They're going to have paid to correct all those fences, lower the tabletops with the same fences, and then we're going to come back and go, yeah, but we want you to change the fencing because we don't really like that. Or we don't like it that you're not all in line with the poles of the overhangs. I think that's what staff's looking for us to do, is kind of set those guidelines along with where the ADA compliance, the cleanliness, the safety of the areas, so that we have, as a city, objective design standards of the way we want those eating areas, those outdoor dining establishments to look like. I mean, we've spent a lot of time talking about the objective design standards versus subjective design standards for houses, but are we going to do the same in the downtown would be my fear. Now, I love what First Street did with all the different countertops and all the different facings, and I'm trying not to name businesses, but bringing out another local business to do a lot of that fencing, it's gorgeous. But then you walk down Oak Street and they're all pretty much wrought iron fences. I never noticed some of them extend far past the front of their business And why are we, I mean, how is that possible? We have to have a limit to how far those overhangs go, where they go. And I think that's part of what we should be doing tonight is setting those standards up. So then when staff does start talking about maybe lowering tabletops or desktops, areas, becoming compliant with ADA regulations, they're also compliant with what we're looking for as design standards for the downtown.
And I just want to be clear, I'm not talking about us, if we did break it up, I'm talking about just providing insurance, which is what I think Tim talked about when we talk about the encroachment, not the ADA write-off, because we do need to hear back about what does it look like, what does it seem like? I'm just talking about providing insurance, that's it.
When it comes to the design, I think that when I looked at this, I thought people who invested and did what they did, and if it's still to what was approved, they should be kind of grandfathered in to it. I don't think they should have to remove anything. But I think that we need standards for going forward. Like if someone new comes in, right? Like if we say the standard is X amount of feet away from the wall and the existing business is added 2 feet, well, we allowed that to happen. So they should just be able to stay like that right now. But if they sell their business, then we can say, okay, you need to, when you sell it, just let them know they're going to have to come to do the standards that we have in the city. But I'm not ready to do standards until like we have some kind of guidelines, like pictures and designs and architectural drawings of some kind. Like, what does that really look like? I wouldn't be ready to do that today. That's why I think there should be a meeting with the businesses downtown. And I'm not only saying the DBC, because I do believe some businesses are not part of the DBC, correct? Or are they all? You got them all? Good for you. So the BC or the downtown businesses. That's why I think it needs to come together and work through it, I think, together and see what we get from there. Or were you looking for like, we want to be X amount from?
No, tonight was the initial discussion.
Okay.
The discussion was, do you want design standards? And if you do, we'll go sit down with the DBC and we'll come back to you with options as part of that. Tonight is the discussion of, okay, how would you like to handle existing conditions, right? I can tell you many of the improvements did not go through an approval process. However, the businesses feel like they did. So I'm being very clear it was during COVID, right? It was a tough time. Our businesses, it's amazing how they survived and they've helped create what we have, this amazing downtown. What we're looking for is if you want design criteria for new businesses, great. We can work on that, come back in a year with that. If you would like to see, we have new people that are coming forward. And if the council says, hey, we want to see ADA path of travel of 5 feet on the sidewalk, we can start working with new businesses that come in right now, even before the code is fully adopted and initiated. So this is really like high level from the city council. Do you want to allow additional tabletop along, so you could grandfather those in? When I say grandfather, that doesn't indemnify them from their requirements of state law for coming and getting a building permit and following ADA requirements. So I think Councilmember Mendoza, as you kind of described, that's what we're here tonight. And I understand maybe I could have done a better job describing that. And we really appreciate all the comments from the city council. And as our city manager stated, there's a couple things we could do immediately. And I will tell you, I think the businesses, we're going to go hit them once. And then if we hit them again in 6 months and then 12 months, I don't think that would go over well. No. The idea of insurance, I like that. Let's do that immediately. And then we'll let them know, hey, in about a year to 18 months, we're probably going to have a new ordinance that we're going to want everyone to follow that's going to also have cleaning of sidewalks, a process to revoke a permit. And then that's where the city council can give us more direction on, okay, do you want to keep everything that's there? And what are the standards for new? Or do you want to pull back and maybe have some changes be made for existing improvements that are out there?
I do have a question about one of the items you brought. I can't remember, it's something about like alcohol and walking through or.
Yeah.
I don't even think that's legal with the ABC. You have to have an enclosed pen, right? So why do we even have to bring that up?
So ABC does allow for, we don't regulate ABC, but I've been in other communities where you have an area outside where a person has to walk outside the door and then get to an area where they actually have their dining, for example, parklets. And
Okay. So you're not
there
talking
is
about people walking through that aren't drinking. You're talking about the person taking the beverage to another enclosed area?
No, I think you had it right. Let's assume that we had people immediately adjacent to the street and not their business. And so a person is walking in between where they're eating and drinking and the business. And I think that's one of the concerns that was brought up by the city council when this was brought
Okay.
up.
And
And staff's recommendation is that we don't allow that.
Yeah.
We
no.
don't have any locations that I think it would work. Staff's recommendation is we don't believe that would be
No.
be good operating. And like I said, we don't have a space for it downtown.
Okay, I wasn't quite sure about that. But yeah, I mean, unless anyone else needs anything, I would say we just,
I would like to make a few
go ahead,
comments,
sorry.
yeah. I really don't like this practice of the person leading the meeting speaking last all the time. I think I just want to interject when I feel like interjecting. I just want to join everyone else in saying, yes, I think it's really clear that all of us, despite what anyone else says or despite what any kind of Facebook post says, we all support downtown businesses. We all believe very strongly that they're contributing to our economic development in a really powerful way, that they've helped the city to stay really solid when a lot of cities were facing some horrible economic challenges. And so hats off to all of our downtown businesses for working so hard to make sure that that the city's doing as well as it is. So we appreciate that as a council. I think collectively we've all said similar comments for that. I do want to say, I didn't write down the code number, but I want to mention on page 240 of the staff report, item B, there is language around pedestrian. I'm going to just repeat what counts. Actually, can you just turn your mic on and say that?
17.900.005.
I am not the one to memorize code numbers, so thank you. I would like to add the language of strollers, electric scooters, and walkers to the language in addition to what's existing there already, which is pedestrians and wheelchairs, since we're talking about equity and accessibility. I think any idea of grandfathering, I would support any idea of figuring out some kind of a grant system or waivers for fees. I would support. What I don't want to see is that any requirements that come from council cause any business economic harm to the point where they can't recover, or that us requiring changes based on design mean they can't serve as many patrons, and so they lose some of their their incomes that way, so the revenues. So I just want to be very cautious about that.
they might lose some space with ADA requirements because they,
Well,
yeah, so you
my
might
my
lose some.
caveat would be that unless it's absolutely necessary. So yeah, exactly. I don't believe we need to have such uniformity downtown, and I don't know for sure how people are feeling about that, but I really like the charm of all of the businesses expressing themselves further, their internal inside design and their external design. I think it's great that Councilmember Orleans mentioned, mentioned a local business that had done some design for one of our downtown businesses, and I totally agree. I think it's beautiful, and I love that they could express themselves that way, and it kind of identifies them. And traditionally, downtowns aren't uniform unless they're created out of a kit, basically, which I don't
Can ask a
really care
question? So
for.
you'd be okay with someone doing fluorescent pillars?
I'm not done.
Okay, sorry.
This is discussing the, for me, the businesses that are currently in place. I do agree that we need to have standards for sure. No, I don't really like the idea of the fluorescent signs flashing and that sort of thing. And I want plastic bars and whatever. I think moving forward, I would like to see that. I think the idea of changing hands, for example, there would have to be some design standards there. That would be maybe a good time to make any necessary changes that are a little bit more significant, unless they're absolutely required by ADA. Let's see. I think there was some concern at one point, because I know I had a couple of complaints, and I believe another council member did as well, where people, for example, during a farmer's market, were buying a to-go alcoholic drink in a to-go container and walking through the farmer's market. But from what I understand, there's some COVID legislation there. Katie, do you want to pop in on that?
So I'm going to share this answer with the chief. During COVID, you're correct that businesses were allowed to provide alcoholic beverages in to-go containers, provided those containers met certain specifications. That did not, however, change existing state law, making it illegal to consume alcoholic beverages in public, and that's where the chief takes over.
Thank you. Good evening. Yes, since this was brought as a possible concern downtown, we've had officers deliberately going down and making a presence known at the farmer's market and addressing any open containers that they would see from the residents, in addition to the weekends and any businesses out front. But yes, according state law, they also lifted the restriction that you had to buy food along with the alcohol. So now you can just buy alcohol to go. And then it's the responsibility of the purchaser not to stick a straw in it and start drinking it as they walk away or drive away. So it falls back on their responsibility. When we do see it, we do address it.
Thank
Can I
you for
ask a
that,
question
chief.
about that real quick?
Yeah.
I know that the unhoused individuals downtown have been drinking. What do we, I mean, they're downtown. It's the same problem. What are we going to do about them? Because they drink out in public and they're drunk in public.
Correct. So when we contact them and they are drunk in public, a danger to themselves or others, they are arrested and sent to county jail. If they have an open container, the officers have discretion to cite them or ask them to pour it out. Typically, when they get contacted, they move along. But on numerous occasions, they've been arrested for being drunk in public. The one individual you are speaking of, that's where he likes to hang out. And we have some citizens in town who are compassionate and continue to contribute to his ability to continue getting alcohol and hanging out in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, chief. And my one final comment before I ask for a motion, if we're ready for that, unless there's more discussion. My one final comment is in looking at in reviewing the staff report, I was looking for the mention of a meeting that happened a few years ago when the outdoor dining discussions were happening. I know that the part of the meeting focus was on parklets, but I remember there being a more robust discussion than only parklets, and I think I would have liked to see that being listed as previous actions. So I would love to have staff look into what that meeting was. I want to make sure when this does come back eventually that we are listing that, including it, so that there's something that will help us to make a decision that that's going to be included in there as well.
So I just wanted to thank the Downtown Brentwood Coalition for being willing and flexible on this and being reasonable and being willing to add another action item on your list of things to do and your willingness to work with the city of Brentwood. So thank you.
So with all of that, unless there's any further discussion, we can look for a motion.
Can we just add a couple things?
Absolutely.
So number one, in addition to outdoor dining, this also includes outdoor merchandise display. So I want to make sure that that's part of the discussion if there's anything. I've also taken some notes that I'd like to go over. Although there's been some direction, and maybe this could help the city council as you make your motion, I can go through these. But Tim, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Just to clarify, in case the motion goes this direction, staff never said remove bar top things. We're saying to be ADA compliant, they have to have an accessible bar top. That may not necessitate removing existing infrastructure. It may just include adding some infrastructure. So just want to make that clear that we may not need to fund that. We didn't fund any of the fencing or bar top. We only funded the gazebos or the awnings. So just want to make sure that was clear as well.
Speaking of funding, can I ask a question? You and I talked one time about Wanna Waffle. They had gotten an email from city staff that they could have it. And then the person who sent the email from the city passed away. And I think they're still waiting on their awning funding.
So the funding has, there's no more funding left for that. And I had followed up with the owner related to that.
But they were told it wasn't going to come out of the grant because it's a city-owned building. It would come out of Public Works is what the email says. So we should probably also look into that as well, since it's all part of the awnings and who's responsible, who's not. If that was promised in an email by a staff employee that, no, you don't go through the grant process, you should go through the Public Works process. It's not the business's fault that they followed staff direction and then were like, the person passed away, so not, I don't want to say the word I was going to say. Okay. When it comes to oh, go ahead.
So if you want, I can, if I could, let me go through some of the things that I've pulled out of the discussion, which might help you with the motion.
I was one question about the clothing fixtures on the you're asking about displays and clothing fixtures. Have we had a lot of problems with those?
So once again, this is, does the council want to create additional language to help strengthen what people can and cannot do as relates to merchandise displays outdoor? So for example, what the equipment that they're using to display it, should it be of a certain standard? One of the things that I mentioned and through the agenda reviews is sometimes a business only has their clearance rack out. And I don't think that that's the most pleasing thing to have on the corner when you drive into Brentwood that says clearance, clearance, clearance. But that is a discussion for the city council, but it's there. And if you want to include some things, or if you want us to strengthen that language, if there's something specific, please give us some, ideas, and then we'll include that as part of the draft as we, go through the process.
And just to add to that, they're on the city's right of way, and we don't have any indemnification if something occurs, and those standards about how far they can encroach into the public right of way, those kind of things. And since they're mobile, they may be ADA compliant one day and someone moves the rack a little bit, now it's not. So again, we need some direction to address that.
Okay. So then I would make a motion to have staff work on news. Oh, sorry, go through your list, sorry.
If you don't mind.
No, actually not late, it usually is.
So the first item was that we would continue with the process to update the zoning code and specific plan. The council said, let's move forward with that, with some caveats that I'll go through and working with the DBC. Implement insurance requirements through an encroachment permit as soon as possible, and that we take care of the liability. And that's both for outdoor dining and outdoor merchandising. So we'd work with all current folks that are operating. Those that do not have an ADR, maybe we'll have to have them go through the process, but we're going to work to get that done as quickly as possible through an encroachment permit. So these are a few of the items that we were hoping to get feedback from, and I think that we've gotten some, and I'll go through them. So one, we talked about a processing fee. I've heard the city council clearly say that they have concerns with that, but I think at the same time, council wanted to know what that fee might be. You're not making a decision, but you're telling us to at least bring you back some information related to a possible fee. There was discussion relating to a cleaning deposit. I didn't hear anyone say don't have one. I think I heard the council say, please bring back information related to a cleaning deposit, what it might be and how it might be used or implemented. The council, I think, has clearly stated that as part of this process, that we would clearly approve an area in which a business is operating. And I'm speaking of new businesses, and it sounds like the council would like to, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it appears that the council would like to allow the businesses that are currently operating, as long as it meets ADA standards, that they could keep their fences where they're currently located. The city council wants to include, as part of an updated code, a process to revoke a permit if they do not follow the conditions on their permit. That a business is not allowed to separate their outdoor dining from the business. So that issue we talked about with a pedestrian walking in between a business operation and an area in which they're drinking. And I'm specifically, my question here is, do you want that for all businesses or only for businesses that are that have alcohol? Because we do have some cases where people have some seating that's in between their business and or they have seating up to the roadway or the parking alley, but they do not have alcohol being served. Does it matter?
I would think as long as you have the space for the wheelchairs, the people walking through, as long as you have that space, you should be fine, right?
In a non-alcohol.
A non-alcohol situation.
I have two, I have three or four.
I agree.
I mean, I understand, and I think I even understand the business we're talking about, but the further we're moving out towards the street, then you've got people coming in and out of that business that are encroaching with the people trying to walk down the sidewalks I understand the space, people walk all the time, and that's what it's designed to do, but the further we open this up, then are we gonna start having alleyways of wrought iron going down
No.
that we're able to walk between?
Have you seen downtown in Walnut Creek where they have it? There's people who sit, I did it, I remember the morning I got married, we were coming back out here to Brownstone, but I stayed in Walnut Creek and me and my kids ate on the side. There was no alcohol served over there. We ate further to the curb and there was a huge sidewalk space. It was more than 4 feet. And then there was the business and there were people sitting here. It was just a nice day. So like that
B would
B,
be
yeah.
an
So B,
example.
where there is a space between there, you can still walk and still go, like the 4 feet is still there. But it allows the business to take it out a little further. They can use both sides actually too.
Would the question then be if it's a self-serve or if there's a wait staff walking back and forth? Is that the concern you're talking
Or is
about?
the
or no?
fencing?
Regular people walking through.
Yeah.
It's all the traffic going in different directions.
So then do we
but-
need to specify that it's not a situation where wait staff could go back and forth and it's a self-serve?
And the fencing is only with ABC stuff.
Yeah.
You don't have to have the fencing if you don't have alcohol. So I think to the point, so you would just
Got
have
it.
some tables over there. Yeah.
Got it.
So I think the council is okay with allowing for it as long as they have 4 feet or 5 feet. So there's been discussion of past council meetings. Are you looking for the minimum standard? We can bring that back to you. Are you looking for the minimum 4-foot standard, or would you like to try to maximize and get 5 feet?
And,
think-
and while we're thinking about 4 feet or 5 feet, are we going to also consider I forgot what they're called, the tree grates as being part of that 4 feet or 5 feet?
This is where I would lean towards what would be more accommodating when you have a wheelchair. It's easy for many of us who don't have those complications, but I think the main concern about downtown that are under, if it's enough space. I'm comfortable with what we have as a regulation for 4 feet. I don't think we need, I don't even know the rationale why one council member said 5 feet or not. I don't even know who it was. Don't matter to me. But my main concern is ADA compliance. And so I think, I think there would need a further discussion before we can start. I mean, I feel like we're talking about the stuff that we said we were going to come back and talk about without having information.
I think unless like the DBC gets together and goes, you know what, no, 5 feet makes a better shopping experience, it makes a better environment, then like, I think that's why I think it'd be nice for you guys to have, we're fine with 4 feet unless they think 5 feet is better for their businesses for some reason.
So the reason I mentioned this one, I'm asking, is this is specifically as part of the future agenda item? And that's why I brought it up. It was part of the staff report.
I think 4 feet is fine as long as if,
Okay.
when you sit down with the DBC, unless they
Okay.
think that it should be 5 feet somewhere,
Okay.
I think we're fine.
So the next one relates to bar seating along fence lines. And let me start with first for future operators.
Darren, I'm sorry, could you put your notes up on the screen so we can follow along? Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm not as eloquent as our city attorney in writing out full, complete paragraphs. But let me blow this up.
I think this is where the business has to be responsible that the person standing outside is not drinking. Yeah, I mean, I just think as long as the person standing outside is not drinking, it's fine. So they can have it, but they're responsible for it. Bless you. Just like they're responsible if someone walks off, like, and they're not serving to walk off kind of thing. Same thing.
I'm looking at the screen, not you. Giving you death stare. What do you think?
So I hear two people that
Yeah, that's fine.
do not have an issue with bar seating.
I mean, if I don't say anything, I'm agreeing.
Okay,
So, yeah.
got it.
I will
just
tell
wanna make
you,
sure that
I do not agree.
we
You know
have-
me, I will say I
Yeah.
don't agree.
I appreciate it. Right now, I'm not going to talk about the implementation process. I want to go to design specifications. So I've heard from council that for new permits, that you would like to see an operator or a new permit process that has design specifications as relates to location, materials, height, and signage. Not that you're looking that everything looks the same. However, you want to make sure that there's a standard. And I'll use an example. The question would be like your furniture. Would you want it to be commercial grade, or would you allow plastic chairs that you might have in your backyard? Those are some of the type of things that if you don't include that, then someone could put it in and we would have no way of holding a business accountable for the type of fixtures that they use. And we can come back to this and bring more information. We're not looking for any type of final discussion. The question is, do you want us to bring information back to you related to design specifications or not? Because that's a significant amount of time and resources to do that. If you don't want it, tell us now and we won't include it as part of a future ordinance.
I mean, I haven't seen any furniture that's crazy by any of the businesses. So I think that if they, I think if they say we're good to go, like our businesses are fine, then I don't think we need to talk about it. I think the DBC is probably harder on them than we are.
Let me just
That's a
give you an
very good
example.
point. They probably have their own
Someone could
standards.
put up a PVC pipe fence.
So I
and
do
some
think
plastic
down the road
chairs, and so
that
that's where
maybe
you-
we can address the design standard when it comes to like plastic furniture and that kind of thing. It's not a big priority compared with the other compliance and liability issues we're talking about, but I think maybe down the road, and very definitely in conjunction with what the DBC is what their goals are in that area.
And then just one note, the encroachment permit ordinance may have to also just come back for a slight revision as well to accommodate what we're thinking. So we'll have to look at that closely. Or we have another.
And then Darren, please don't forget to add the language that we discussed.
That was the language in the access to include all accesses for all types. Correct.
Yeah, it was strollers and electric scooters and, what did I forget? There was one more. Walkers, thank you.
Okay. And then finally, I don't think that we have great direction here, but as related to implementation process, number one, that we grandfather in the space that's currently being used for existing operators, that they still would be required to follow all building codes as relates to ADA and anything else that they've made improvements. And then this was just an old note for me, so I'll
So
delete this.
when you put these in, was the standard, it just goes in front of their storefront? What was your standard when you guys all worked on it, Les?
So this was prior to my time with the city, that most of these things were done during COVID. So there are some that were done prior to COVID, but I would tell you the majority of some of the new improvements were done during COVID.
Okay, thanks.
So we'll provide some more information, but at least I think I hear the city council saying that they don't want to require a business to have to spend additional funds to move back their fence, that they should be able to stay where they currently are, but still have to meet all their ADA requirements, unless there might be a grant opportunity or.
Unless they can move it at no cost. So
they can
there,
move
we
it at
saw
no
some
cost.
today as we walked that they can just move it back and it's not going to be a significant issue, right? They don't have to remove fence components and get a new fence to do that.
Wait, I'm confused about that. So we're saying they're going to be grandfathered in unless you can move it easily? I'd go drill them into the ground right now.
They better hurry. They may still need that encroachment permit, right, and insurance, but
But if
without
they,
the standards, that's where
guess
it's so challenging.
I just feel if they've been doing business like this and we have a code that has certain guidelines and we haven't enforced any of it until now, they're grandfathered in, right? They stood strong during COVID. We have to respect that. If they sell the business, then we'll have our new standards in place. You're selling the business, but the patio will be under new standards. Yeah, and this is with the exception of ADA requirements. We can't do anything.
So when I say exception of ADA requirements, and they're required to have a building permit. So anything that would require a building permit, they'll have to go through that process. So if they installed electrical and did not get a building permit, they'll need to get that. They're in our public right of way. We need to ensure that it was properly installed.
Okay, I understand electricity, but what if the fence, like their fence has been there forever and they didn't get a building permit for the fence? Are you going to have them move it? And they're ADA compliant. Are you going to have them move that? Or is that something we're saying they can keep that?
So I think that's maybe a question for the building official. I don't know if a fence would require a building permit or not.
So a fence itself does not require a building permit. The only thing that would require a building permit with respect to the fences that we see are,
Sorry, can you please raise the microphone?
the only thing that would
Thank you.
require a building permit with respect to the fences that are out there are the bar tops that are on top of them.
Okay,
But the fences themselves, the 4 feet tall or 42 inches or whatever they are, they do not require building permits.
okay.
And can I ask one follow-up question? If there might be a situation where a fence was installed and was attached to a fixture, might that require a building permit?
It would require removal of that.
Removal of that?
Yeah.
Got it.
Is
So
it-
there might be, I don't want to call out a specific business, but they might have put their fence and attached it to something which would have required it to have a building permit. If they wasn't on there, would not be required to have a building permit. Does that make sense? They've attached it to a column,
Okay,
and that would
Okay.
not be allowed because that piece was approved and did not take into consideration that additional bearing weight that might be being placed on it.
Or anything. You can't,
anything.
it's it's an engineered piece of equipment, a piece of material, and you can't attach things to it without having all the considerations, taken into account.
okay.
And I want to say thank you so much for everything. We should walk a mic to you next time instead of you walking. You are sharp as a tack
I'll
right
sit
now.
closer next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, can I just,
I was just going to say, can we have a motion?
Yeah, so can I make a motion that staff works on their list presented by Darren and works with the DBC to come together on standards, on processes, on how we can make this as painless as possible and unless it's ADA required, as minimal movement of anything as possible.
And before you finish the motion, I do want to make sure that we ask Alexis if there's anything else that as we discussed, that you feel like we might need some additional direction to at least get started.
No, I think we have enough to get started. There'll be a lot more robust conversation once we present you with additional information. I would just flag, you said unless ADA requires it. I would also say building code because that's a life safety
Okay,
issue.
unless ADA and building code with, and what? Or ABC.
Do we need to add any language about prioritization or a timeline or drawing it out
was
over a
gonna
period of
say-
time?
Yeah, I was gonna say with the priority with the insurance and the cleanliness is what we, didn't we say that was, yeah. And the liability. I think
Any
we're
questions
good.
on that motion before I ask for a second? We're all good? Okay, can I have a second? I'll make a second. That's okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, thank you. We are going to move into requests for future agenda items. This is the time for new agenda requests, and please let me know if you have one. Okay, I actually have one. I would like to, I'd like to request that the council considers changing the regular meeting time of the Ag Enterprise Committee. It currently meets quarterly on the first Monday of each month at 2, and I would like to change that closer to the end of the day, as early as 4 or 5. Any questions on that one? Is that clear? I don't know who I'm asking, I guess.
So no earlier than 4 or
Right.
or 5.
4 or
On the
5,
same day of the week? That's
depending on,
currently set?
Monday is fine, yeah, I
That's
think it just,
quarterly still?
I'd rather it was not in the middle of the day is what I'm getting at.
Got it.
Okay, thank you. The other one is not necessarily an agenda item as much as it a question or request. We made a decision a while back, a council decision, to show public comments on the screen at the beginning of the meeting. We don't appear to be doing that anymore.
I can speak to that. That was just this one. It has been at previous meetings. I just couldn't switch from the presentation to that with my one person sitting here. When we have both Margaret and I, it's an easier, and actually I was not here at the last meeting, so Margaret probably had the same.
Okay, yeah, because it didn't happen last time
inability with-
either.
When there's just one of us sitting here and we have a public
Totally
or
get that.
staff presentation, it's difficult, but yes, we will continue to do that.
Wonderful.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you very much. And with that, we have one more motion to look for.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And I'm going to have to ask for everyone's understanding because I've been wanting to do this all night. We are adjourned.
Wait, no, we haven't voted. Did we vote?
All in favor?
Aye.
Now we're adjourned.